Okay, let's get started. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for Is Entrepreneurship the Right Career Path for You? My name is Irene Tang, and I'm welcoming you to today's session. If this is your first time attending one of our events, let me provide you some context on Startout. Startout accelerates the growth of the LGBTQ plus community to drive its economic empowerment, building a world where every LGBTQ plus entrepreneur has equal access to lead, succeed, and shape the workforce of the future. I'm excited to introduce Rachel from WOKEN, who will be leading today's session. WOKEN provides coaching, tools, and guidance on all things career, including career mindset, accountability, networking, interviewing, overall career advancement, and more. The floor is yours, Rachel.
Awesome. All right. I am going to share my screen and assuming you can all see this okay. And I will keep the chat open and just check it as well periodically. So feel free to pop in questions. And we'll definitely have time at the end for some questions as well. So, super quickly, I started out at Goldman Sachs and then I went to Bridgewater Associates. From there, I got coaching, training, and certified. And I also did a tech MBA program at NYU. And I've done coaching through a variety of organizations, in addition to building my own company now for over 6 years. And we are a bootstrapped company, and we provide career coaching as a subscription. And we also have a software. So, just from the entrepreneurial perspective, you guys get a little bit of context as to kind of what my startup journey has been. And I'm happy to answer more questions about that at any point. But for the sake of today, uh, I kind of have this dual hat on where, of course, I'm a career coach and I help people decide their path. But of course, I have the personal experience of starting my own thing. And so for today, we're going to go through some career frameworks that are going to help you think independently and objectively about what's right for you. And then we are going to specifically talk about entrepreneurship as well, and we'll leave that Q&A time really wide open so that you get all your questions answered. But the beginning of the event is really structured this way so that you might have entrepreneurship on the mind, but how can you really think just broadly about who you are, where you belong professionally, and then, see if that validates or helps you really come up with, entrepreneurship as that end result. So that's kind of the approach today. Cool. All right. So I quickly show this slide, and there's a lot of text here, but what this is essentially saying is a large majority of professionals at work are disengaged at work, and this impacts our well-being. So we might feel burnt out, right? Work affects who we are, and there's a lot of reasons why we may not have fallen into the right career path. But, deciding on the right career path is obviously such a big and important choice. And what I do is help make it more feasible to be informed with your next, future direction. And really just assessing, where am I at? What's been going well, what hasn't been going well, and what do we need to optimize for, right? Because that might be entrepreneurship, it might not be, right? So I just give this reminder to show people that there's a broader context around you at work. And it's not, just you, but you're doing the right thing by being here, which is putting the thoughtful steps forward to see where should you go next. And so we're going to get into some of these frameworks, but a quick, framework that I like to think about is role, industry, environment. So if you're ever reflecting on what's been going well, where can I use some room for improvement, you can always come back to that quick framework to see if that helps bring up some ideas of your next steps. And this is just a very brief reminder. Why does it matter to even find a path you're engaged with? Well, it affects you and your life. It affects your physical and mental health and your wealth potential. And of course, there's a cost on the company side, whether you are engaged at work or not. So it is very important what you're doing. You're already in the right place to be thoughtful about your path forward. So that's good. This is just some extra, bonus, right? Why do we need to find a career path that is aligned with us? Well, you're going to get better at doing it. You're going to make more money, and you're going to make more money faster. So what's interesting about entrepreneurship is if you do lean into some of your strengths or your expertise, it is very possible that that can reward you well. But at the same time, we know that startups can also take time to become fruitful. We'll talk about all of that. But statistically, when you're finding your path that you're aligned with, that you're engaged with, you will be more successful in doing that. If you end up job searching, the reason why you're clarifying, what it is, whether it's a job search or whether it's pursuing your startup, you want to be clear in your path forward because it's going to make it more efficient and more effective. If you're on the fence of so many different career directions, it is going to be harder to figure out like what are your next steps. So whether it's entrepreneurship or not, we want you to feel crystal clear about whether that's the path that you want. And it's going to just make it organic for you to grow and develop over the course of time. It's going to feel more relieving and exciting, less stressful, right? So the whole point of this is just to say, give yourself the moment, and we're going to talk about how to do it to figure out what's right for you. This webinar, this workshop is step number one, and there's going to be a few suggested steps after. But the reminder here is it is absolutely worth it and important and productive to take the time to figure out what the right direction is for you before you go pursue any of those options, right? What I'm going to do here is just quickly talk about some common reasons why somebody may choose a certain path and try to frame it in a way that's a little more productive or constructive, because you do want to ask yourself, why am I interested in, whether it's entrepreneurship or whatever the path is? You want to know your drivers and your intentions and make sure you're coming from the right place. So I'll go through some of those common approaches and make sure you can think about it in the best way for yourself. So the first one is stress. We could feel stress around our career path for any number of common reasons, right? But what I like to do is try to apply structure. So what that means is, like if you're operating out of a place of stress, you might just like do things that are a little more irrational. You might go hop on a job board and apply to things randomly, or you might, any number of rash things. So what we want you to do is when you're feeling the stress, take a step back and apply some structure to figure out, all right, what's my goal? Is my goal to figure out my career path? Is my goal to, test out a startup idea? Is my goal to test demands for this idea? Is my goal just to learn about what other founders' life is like and whether that's the path I want to pursue? So really take that step back and give yourself some steps and support to navigate through. Security. So security is an interesting one because entrepreneurship is usually on the opposite end, where we're willing to take a risk and invest in the potential for a future greater security. But sometimes people pursue a career path because they're like, I just want security. I like to make sure that you're pursuing this decision based on this path feels like right for me. It's the right fit for me. I know what I'm getting into. I'm interested in, I'm committed. I believe in this and all those reasons. And I understand the financial, behind what this career decision looks like. So just make sure you're thinking holistically about all the things of why you're choosing it. And is it fit? Is it a fit? Is it aligned? And not just like, that financial element is obviously one piece. A lot of times, and especially with startups and entrepreneurship, we tell ourselves, I can't, or I'm not going to be able to, or it's too hard, right? Startup life definitely can be hard, but at least give yourself that benefit of the doubt to learn about like what is the reality of starting a startup, and then you could decide what does that mean for you, because there's a lot of ways to feel entrepreneurial. You could join and be the second employee, or you could be a co-founder, or you could be a leader, but are you the number one? Are you the CEO, or are you joining a small organization? So when you're learning about yourself and you're learning about what you want and you're learning about different varieties of what startups could look like, you're just giving yourself that benefit of the doubt to say, I'm not sure what I can or can't do. I'm not sure what I want to do just yet. I'm going to learn about what's out there and I'm going to strategize accordingly, right? So just try not to rule things out just based on initial limited information, right? Sometimes our past, right? We look at like, oh, can I do this? Have I been trained to do this? Or I haven't been trained to do this. So think about your story more than your past. A lot of founders start things where, like even for me, I had like, a lot of personal experiences with career coaching, and that really helped me to innovate the space. So your past may help serve you. So don't limit yourself by your past, but really think about that. I've heard a lot of people say, founder startup fit, right? Like what's the story? And what makes sense if you have a product or service idea in mind, your expertise, your niche, your interest in a certain space, can do you well, right? And so think about why you're interested in that next thing and how that's going to come across, whether it's during sales or investor meetings or whatever. That story is really what matters the most, rather than just like, have you done this exact thing before? So, don't limit yourself just based on like on paper. And especially with startups, you can always bring in the right talent. That's a whole other can of worms of how to bring in talent. But there are other ways to complement, the needs that you have long term, right? So startups are often like, we'll start it and we'll think about, it's a long term play. What I like to personally think about is like, you don't know where you're going to be in the long term. You don't know if your startup's going to last in the long term. I like to think about, where am I at right now? Like, does this make sense for me as a next step? And by the way, this all goes for like whether you're searching for a job or startup, whatever it is, it's the same idea. You want to be happy that like this step makes sense at this time, and you want to understand where it could lead you in the future. um but you want to feel really, really good that this is sort of the right time, and you understand that like it's going to be an exciting fit and a valuable, meaningful opportunity right now. Okay. A lot of times people tell me, I'm open to anything. I'm open to, either joining a startup team or starting something myself or doing freelancing or doing this. And it's like, there's so many options on the table. If you're open to so many different things, to me, that's a sign that we lack a little bit of the clarity. So, what I would do is lean into more learning and more reflection. I would rather you be, I mean, picky is a strong word, but let's call it narrow, let's call it clear. You want to really look at what are the options and which one, makes the most sense for me. As soon as you're certain, it's going to be so much easier to go execute on whatever that plan is. And sometimes we're only aware of certain things. And this is especially, for startups. Like, we are often around people that are just raising, VC funds, or we're around people where, we just look at in the news, we hear just a few success stories. But what about the mass of startups that you don't hear about, right? So really make sure you say, I don't know what all the different options are. I don't know how this could look. And just be honest with yourself and be honest with others. And that's the best way you're going to learn about all the different ways that this can look for you. Um, this is more job search oriented, so I'll skip that for now. And again, we often look at other people around us. So this is interesting with startups, because we look at founders, and sometimes we admire that, right? But just think about yourself. You might be more successful being a number 2 or number 3, and I don't know that. I'm just saying, ask yourself who you are and what you want, and define success for yourself. Because if someone else, we want other people around you to be either inspirational or provide information. If they're doing one of those two things, great, keep them in your life. But if you're like envious of a person in a way that's like not serving you, and you're just sort of like copying what they're doing, I would just notice, because as humans, like, we all look across the fence at other people, but just make sure that when you see those other people, they're serving you in a way that's positive or motivational or whatever it may be, versus just following what someone else is doing. It may or may not make sense for you, right? And oftentimes we have fear. It was really scary for me to start my own thing, but just remember, you can always replace fear with learning. So it's a tool. If you have uncertainties, if you have hesitations, if you have questions, great. Those hesitations, those uncertainties, turn those into questions, turn those questions into answers, and turn that information into decisions and a strategy, right? So let your feelings serve you. And today's a great place. You can hit me with some of those concerns, and I'll see how I can help. But, I love networking personally, and I love hosting informational mentor calls. Go chat with 2, 3, 4, 5 founders and just see, are they all saying different things? Does it look differently? What are they saying when I tell them these concerns? And how does that make me feel? Is that making me feel like I'm ready to go do it? Or is that making me feel like maybe this isn't right for me, right? So be open and allow yourself to explore before you're ready to go. And yeah, just notice your own mindsets, because as a founder, as a CEO in a startup, you have to be, you are your own boss. And so you have to be really honest with yourself, like brutally, and self-aware. And like, imagine at work, like giving yourself a performance review instead of somebody else. You really have to be able to say, how am I feeling? What's serving me? What's not? And even the same goes for one, say you do start that startup, like even today, I need to be so brutally honest with myself to say, what's my mindset and how is it getting in the way? Because who I am as a person is going to influence the business, right? It's all intertwined. So you have to be really willing to tap into all of that, whether it's all about how you're starting out the process, but also throughout the entire journey, right? If you do pursue it. So, whenever you're thinking about your next steps, career wise, again, I sort of briefly mentioned this, but this is a great reflective exercise where you can actually reflect on past job experiences, or you can actually do a deep reflective exercise to say, what am I looking for going forward? So in terms of, I call it function, but function is really role. So what that means is day-to-day activities. You could do a brainstorm exercise of like, what would I like to be doing all day? What's the pie chart of my week? And what am I great at? What am I natural at? What do I want to spend my time doing? Because that really may shed light on like, do you want to be that early leader on another team, or do you want to be your own, person? And usually we start as a team of one, or a, co-founder team, right? And so knowing yourself, what you're great at, that's going to really help either to find a complementary co-founder or to go join a team. Or if you're starting, you need to know, what skills you need a complement of your own. Now, keep in mind, the weird thing about a startup is that like your job's probably going to change every 3-ish months. I like to use like that 3-month benchmark with startups. But this is a good moment to think about like, what do I want to be doing day to day? And does that actually align with like what a founder's life is, right? So career exploration is like, what is the job or what is the journey and what am I like? What do I want? And relating those two. The second piece is what I call content, which is essentially industry, right? So you could go do data analysis, or you could do consulting, or you could do a lot of different functions and apply that to different industries. So just make sure to separate the two. And especially if you're debating a new startup idea, industry is really important to make sure that the impact, the mission is something that really, really aligns with you. If you don't care about that problem area or that sector, don't start that company. And then environment, right? Like, are you good in a small team? Are you good in an ambiguous environment? Startups notorious for those types of things. So ask yourself what you need and where you thrive and what serves you in terms of the environment. And this is, by the way, even if you're settled on starting a startup, this is still a great way to brainstorm to say, what should my role look like? What type of industry am I going to focus on, or subsectors? And what type of culture do I want to create in my startup? So this is a really simple but powerful framework. Again, if you're reflecting on your past, if you're trying to clarify your future, or any way, shape, or form, if you ever need to come back to it, it's always there for you. Cool. Let me see. I think what we can do is take a quick 5 minutes, and this is going to be a bit of an interactive moment. So, we're going to do a mini little exercise and just start to apply some of this to yourself so you can actually think about who you are and what you're all about. And so, grab a piece of pen and a paper, or you can type things out. I'll give you a second to just get ready, and feel free. I don't know if the thumbs up emoji works on this thing, but feel free to let me know when you're ready, and we'll do a super quick exercise to get you all really thinking and applying this to yourself. So, is everyone ready to go? Okay, beautiful. Thank you. So, the first section of this reflection is essentially kind of what I was just explaining earlier, which is what I call function. So, it's the day to day. So, think of a few different experiences, projects, things you might have chose to take on, things you really enjoyed, and just jot down a few words that at least remind you what those experiences were. And that way we have a short list of just a few things in your past. It could be within a work job, it could be outside of work, it could be however far back you need to. But what are the top 1 or 2 or 3 projects that stand out to you where you were really energized and interested in whatever it is you were doing? So let's start there, and I'll keep guiding you through the prompts. I'll give you a few seconds on each one. And it doesn't have to be perfect sentences. So just jot down keywords of whatever comes to your head. Okay. So once you're thinking of those few experiences, I want you to pick the top one. So this is just something that's your favorite project, something you really enjoyed, you were interested in it. Pick which one you want to roll with for your top project, top experience. And then what you're going to do is try to break down the verbs. So, like, take that project and ask yourself, what was I doing? What were the action verbs? What were the activities, the skills, the day to day, phrases of what really went into that? What were you really doing if you had to break it down into a few core, parts of that project? What were those activities or those actions that you were doing? Give you a few more seconds. I know I'm going quickly, but you can always come back to the recording. So what you want to do is after you start breaking down some of those action verbs, continue that list. So say you have a short list of the actions that you were doing in that project. Now you want to take a lens of looking at that list as just like things you like doing. And you kind of want to just continue that list. What other activities, skills, day-to-day actions and phrases would you add to the list if you were to just think about things that you really enjoy, things you're good at, things you're natural at, things you enjoy doing professionally or otherwise? And so just keep continuing that list. Another fun prompt that aligns with this section is if somebody were to ask you to do a project today, what would it be? If they were going to pay you to do anything, like picture a fictional, you know, company, whatever the role title, doesn't even matter. And you could picture this like you in your own startup, somebody gave you funding to go start a thing, or it could be in a broader company. But if there was a project you could be like paid to do today, what would it be? You want to also think of times that you've helped others or what people come to you for help with. What do you enjoy helping others with? That's another component of this part, right? That function of what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, or providing value and service to others in what way. Okay, let's go to the second section. I know I'm going quickly. You can always come back to this. The second section is what I call content, right? So if you're going to be creating some product or service or startup or whatever it is, and you're thinking about your day to day, your skills, your strengths, the industry, right? The type of product, the type of service, the type of impact, who are you going to help, more specifically, right? That's that second piece. So I would start to think about like topics that you read about, topics you listen to on the news, podcasts, articles, social media. Who do you follow? What do you pay attention to? What are those topics that stand out to you? Problems in the world that you feel need solving. There's so many problems, right? But which are the ones that just get you like frustrated and like fired up and like how is this still a thing and it's not fair, it's not right, or we need to fix this, right? What problems in the world are you most intrigued by or care about? topics you love learning about or talking about with others or thinking about. Sometimes there's like things we'll recommend to friends, or it could be like an app we love or something, and they're just like bored listening to us. Like, what are those things that get you jazzed, that you spend that free time to learn about, that you want other people to know about? What are those topics? And products or services you find interesting. Like, this is similar to kind of what you might tell your friends about, but is there some digital, app or some tool or some physical storefront or some company that you really follow, products or services you think are really innovative or impactful, or you just love using it, right? Or you want to try it, or you've been following them, or whatever it may be, right? Products or services that stand out to you. Okay, let's go to the environment. So now this is really helpful because if you're either going to create your own team, create your own culture, company culture, or you want to join a small team or whatever it may be, you really want to think about what serves you in a work environment. So, one of my questions is usually the size of the team, small, medium, large. And, the weird thing about starting a company is you may say, look, I thrive in medium sized teams, but right now I'm going to build it up to that point. Sometimes we go in knowing that it's a journey and it takes time to build out our vision. But, it is worth asking yourself, like, where do you thrive? What type of team size, right, do you thrive on? And that may help you to determine your next steps, right? So, team size, obviously, the pace of the work is something else you can think about: fast paced, medium, slow paced. Do you want to travel or not? Remote, hybrid, in person type of a workplace. And, that might even help you. Like, do you want to go have a co working space right now? I mean, physically, the environment that serves you to think and operate. And really, the traits of the people you want to work with, right? The values, the personality. What should it all look and feel like? And sometimes for this, people will close their eyes and like physically see what you're seeing, right? Like, see if there's any images that come to you of like, what does that next work environment like literally look like if I close my eyes and can dream up anything? So what does it look and feel like? Okay. For the sake of time, I will continue. But yeah, these are just some beginning prompt reflecting questions, right? Of course, there's so much more where that came from. But I show you this slide to again remind you that it's okay to take a week or two or three or four or however long you need to go through the process of learning and reflecting and figuring out what your next steps are about. If you have options on the table, whether it's starting a startup or some other option, compare, contrast, and clarify amongst all your options. Just prioritize, right? It's not to say you can never go do option number two or three, but you do want to differentiate and figure out what is the best next step for you, or what is the best step right now for you, right? This is a little more job search oriented, so I will skip over this for right now. And I'm going to walk you through like what is career exploration. So if you were to just be in a mode of like, I really want to learn about starting a company and I want to make sure that that's the right path for me, or if you have other ideas or options, what you would do, of course, is start by committing to saying, I need to go on my journey of career exploration, and I'm committed and I'm ready and I want to figure this out. And then we reflect. So the questions I just gave you are just the beginning. You can obviously continue that and go a little deeper. Then you want to think about what options you have on the table, right? So maybe being a founder CEO is one option. Are there other options of how this could look for you? What are the options on the table? And then a little bit of online research, mostly networking. And there's a lot we could talk about with what to ask, but you really want to be creative and concrete with the right questions so that you can learn deeply. And the thing about starting a company is it can and will look very different types of ways. So get as many types of perspectives as you can. And remember, you're not asking people necessarily their opinion. You're asking for facts and information and stories and data points. And, you're turning your concerns into questions and allowing them to provide some level of perspective or exposure. And when you do that a few different times with a few different people who are in the path that you're considering, that is what's going to help you to get to the point of knowing for sure what is it I want to pursue. You want to get behind the scenes, you want to get under the hood, you want to paint a picture so crystal clear so that you know what path makes sense for you. And if you still aren't sure, do more learning or more reflection or both. So my reminder is you can and will get to a point of feeling certain on your path forward, right? And by the way, the same kind of concept goes, even if you know you want to start a company and you're just doing customer discovery, it's the same idea. Explore and make sure you're testing the different ideas until it really feels solid, right? And there's a lot more we could talk about with how to do customer discovery and how to test demand and all that kind of stuff. But just give yourself the time you need to explore. So let's see. Okay, I guess I'll go out of order here because my animations are out of order. But this is just a few of my personal thoughts, right? I obviously only have one startup journey to share. Of course, I've met other founders and seen other things, but from my own personal take, the one of the things you can keep in mind is what I call like the math, right? On paper math and the business model. So you want to ask yourself, like, physically, how am I going to fund this journey? How am I going to fund myself? What money do you need to survive right now, right? Because there's a difference between what you're going to startup's going to make right now versus later. Personally, I did a lot of part-time jobs and then eventually quit those things, but there's a lot of different ways to fund yourself and your startup. So you can look at like, what do I think I can charge to how many clients on what frequency, and look at like what monthly income you need. And just do a little bit of that math to say, what would that look like, right? You could sort of go up the funnel to say, okay, if I need 2 clients a month, I'm probably going to have 5 to 7 calls a month. And that means I need 30 to 50 leads per month or whatever it is, right? Roughly assume or estimate the numbers based on your type of business model. And that at least is going to help you start to do the outbound efforts and really test the market and get out there and figure out what volume you need to be doing if you're actually trying to sell something, right? So there's that on paper math. And this actually is relevant, right? The reality and the financials, right? What's your risk appetite? What's your financial runway? And what resources do you need? Like if you're doing something that requires factory and inventory, like do you need to fundraise, right? Or any software, you should probably be able to have an MVP or get scrappy or build it. And what I did was, and I could tell you more about our MVP journey, but we built really small and scrappy MVPs, and then we started charging, and then that revenue funded the build of more advanced digital products, right? So it just depends what your product is and what is required up front. And just learn about all the different methods. There's grants, there's debt, there's accelerators, there's crowdfunding, there's equity as a way of getting resources and talent. And of course, there's fundraising and there's bootstrapping, right? So there's so many different methods that you can look into. And there's a variety of what entrepreneurship could mean, right? So you could purely innovate a product or service that literally doesn't exist, or you could be more like consultant freelance-esque, right? So you're sort of offering yourself, your service, your knowledge, your sort of time as a consultant. You can also be a leader in an early stage company, or of course there's entrepreneurship. There's a lot of corporations where they have like an internal venture studio, or even entrepreneur in residence type roles, or really you could think about, what do I care about doing and what do I care about innovating, and are there other companies where I can play a role in that, right? Whether it's a small startup or not. So being on the right team, you really want to think about, what are you best at innovating, and that could happen within a big company or not. So innovation can look a lot of different ways, but doing it fully on your own is one choice amongst many. Choosing your lane. So like my thing is like, don't start something unless you truly care deeply about that type of product or service or that problem or that customer base. Like you just won't survive the level of patience and persistence that is required. Testing demands. You can actually do this on the side of a job, right? You can try to test and prove demand or prove out your concept, do an MVP, start scrappy, always start scrappy with low cost, easy ways to build and test. But again, you can do this on the side of a job, and just keep in mind, there's a lot of glamorized startup stuff out there. So just that networking is so huge to get behind the scenes and understand the reality of how long does this take and what does this look like and what did you have to do and all that kind of stuff, right? I do have a blog. I put the bit.ly link down here. It's another blog about, considerations that you may have before starting. But just so you all know, this is very much what WOKEN does, is we guide folks through the process of navigating their path, and we have coached folks who have started things. And so if you just need that accountability and a little momentum when you're going from 0 to 1, I will make sure you all have our links and ways of getting in touch with us. But we've got a lot of time left for Q&A, so I know I just went super quickly, but if you have any questions, would love to answer. And I know I skipped over a lot of my own personal journey and things like that. So if you want to hear more about like hiring or really anything of what I've done and how I've done it, I'm happy to kind of go deeper into my own path if that's helpful. And I will make sure you all have our site. And I do see a question, sharing the worksheet. We are going to share the recording with you all so you can sort of see the slides and listen back that way, just to answer your question in the chat. Yeah, so if anyone has questions, please feel free. You can either unmute or write in the chat, and let me know whatever would be most helpful to dive more into.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all the information and excited to look at your website and see the offerings. I recently am embarking in opening up a consultancy coaching on my own. I've been in recruiting, talent acquisition for over 20 years, so looking to take that in a different direction. Admittedly, I have ADHD, and I'm like, so trying to start this process because you're learning so many new things from bookkeeping, accounting, opening the business, all of that. But the one thing that I feel like I've gotten a little bit stuck on is making the decision of, do you start as a sole proprietor? Do you start as LLC? How do you that's the one part I've been digging into so much about. And I'm sure it's very like personal, like what path you choose to go on. But if you have any insight or advice on that, I would really appreciate hearing that.
So there are a lot of components to think about, right? There's the legal, the hiring, like you said, the financials and the accounting. Of course, there's the marketing, the sales, the operations. There's so many components. Legally, there's a few things to think about. I wouldn't worry about incorporating until you have like a contract or money that's going to exchange hands one way or another. That's one way of thinking about it. Like if you're just spending your own money to like pay for QuickBooks or to like pay for like small things, then like you're probably fine to keep going. And then the minute like you have a client or something of that nature, then you want to have that like legal entity and protection and a separate bank account and things like that. But in terms of which entity, there's tax implications, but there's also just a few different like legal things of like, how does it protect and separate you as a person from the company if somebody were to like sue you or things like that. And so what I have found is there's a lot of law firms that are specialized in startups. So usually they are very willing to take an initial call for free, and just you can ask these types of questions. Or if you haven't already, joining like a webinar and listening to like what are the different types of entities, and just understanding pros and cons and finding resources on that. But personally for me, it's a matter of like if the webinars aren't doing it for you, have a person who can like listen, because there might be reasons why you're debating those two things based on you as a person and the type of business, right? So I would really just try to find like a lawyer and make sure you ask the right questions, or an accountant, right? A legal entity has differences based on the legal element and the tax element. So I would just ask the right people. And, especially if you're looking for somebody to help you with your accounting anyway, hopefully they're willing to take that initial call. And if you feel, for me, with a lawyer or an accountant, it's like, if you feel like you're learning from the person effectively, you can communicate clearly, and you're gaining knowledge in that call, they're probably somebody you may want to work with. And by the way, I will say most startups get accounting help too late. So if you're going to invest anywhere, having a bookkeeper or accountant and or tax expert in the beginning is always good. But yeah, ask your questions to those experts, and like, you can make it like a mentor oriented thing. Like, I'd love to learn from you if you're willing to spare 15-20 minutes, but you could also say, I'm starting something and I might be looking for help, whether it's now or in the future. Like, for them, it's a sales call. Like, they
Right,
will
right.
want to talk to you, so
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I just signed up
cool.
for Rocket Lawyer for a free trial. So I think that's a really great resource. I don't know if you've ever used them.
I haven't, but I incorporated on LegalZoom. So like, I did incorporate
Mhm.
myself because LegalZoom like gives you all the basics,
All the
but
stuff.
you just need to know going in which thing am I choosing from the drop down, which entity do I want. But conversations, usually
Mhm.
people are open to that, having that first call for free,
Right.
usually.
Well, thanks.
Okay. All right. And let me see what we got in the chat. So I'm looking at freelancing to test demand. Should I look at forming a business first or wait until I see demand? You can definitely test out demand before you incorporate anything legally. I would not worry about the legal stuff until you know what it is you're doing, until you have a contract that's going to exchange hands or money that's exchanging hands. You don't really need to worry about the legal incorporation just yet. So this is for Dane's question. So definitely test demand. And if you haven't already heard the term customer discovery, I'm sure Start Out has a lot of events on that kind of stuff. But we could talk a lot about how to test demand. But yes, you definitely should start in like low cost, free, scrappy ways, test demand. Whether it's learning about your customers or just putting something out there and seeing if they're, if you post about something and people are willing to email you because you could potentially solve their problem, they're showing interest in potentially taking effort to solve their problem. If you think, how are they going to, paying is the greater scale than just reaching out. If they're not willing to reach out to you to get help with their problem, are they going to be willing to pay for help? So definitely test demand. Let's see. Yes, I'm seeing somebody mention Score. Absolutely. Free resources, free business advice. Yep, I've used Score myself. I'm seeing another question. So, potential career pivot point. Somebody's thinking of working with a career coach. What can I do before and to be best prepared to get the most bang for my buck? So, Steph, this is an amazing question. I think people usually wait too long to work with a coach. Like, the beauty of a career coach, if they're the right person, is they will meet you where you're at. So, like, you don't need to prepare. The whole point is you're trying to get help. So maybe you're stuck and maybe you tried to do things on your own. The whole point of getting a coach is like, you want to feel like you're in their hands and they're going to, for me, like, I teach somebody what to do, how to do it, why to do it, when to do it, where to do it. And so it just depends. I mean, another coach might have a different answer, but personally, I would give you the homework. Like, if I needed you to do some background, deep self-reflection, sure, I'll tell you how to do that and I'll give you the resources and the assessment to do it. So I wouldn't just like wait to feel like you need to do things on your own, because then you're just going to be lost still. You know what I mean? Like, if you're ready for help, get that help. You know what I mean? Doing the work to answer the types of questions you pose. Are there other things to think about? Nope. What I would think about if I were you is just, what kind of coach do I want? What kind of like sessions, or like, do I want tools, or like, what kind of coaching format would be helpful to me? And then meet with a few different coaches and like get a feel, and then you'll see who is the best fit for you. So that's what I would really do. How do you ask good questions when you don't know what you don't know? So Derek, same thing. It's I think when you meet with the coach, that's exactly why you're trying to meet with them, to say, how do you help me? Here's what I know. Here's what I don't know. What do you do to help me? Right? You're only expected to know so much. And that's why I do what I do, because a lot of people forget career coaches are out there. You're not expected to like know how to actually navigate your career. Like the same way you would go to a financial advisor or a tax advisor or a lawyer. Like, career coaches are real, and we're here to teach you and guide you, so don't feel like you have to do it all on your own. SBA, startup business courses. Yes. Thank you for that. Okay. Doing contract marketing. I'm hoping to add a few more clients this year. Should I register as an LLC or wait until I have more clients? So Danny, if you have any clients at all, I probably would definitely legally incorporate. Just make sure you know which entity you want to form. But definitely reach out to like a tax professional, CPA, and a lawyer just to make sure you know what makes sense for you. And especially if you have already money that's coming in the door, talk with different folks to understand how to organize all of that, and the pros and cons. So I'll defer to the experts on that one. SBA, SCORE, great. Yep. What kind of financial safety net of emergency fund do you need? Do you think people need before they jump into entrepreneurship? That's a great question. I think it really depends. So you can do a rough, like I talked about that business model math, but you can also do like a rough like roadmap. So, for example, like maybe you want to, and it depends how much time you have or how much time you're devoting, but like how many weeks do you want to devote to like customer discovery? How many weeks do you want to devote to like testing demand? What type of MVP or initial product can you get off the ground? So you might look at that rough roadmap and say, look, I need 3 months to test if this is an even viable idea. And by the way, if there's a world that you're going to test it and then go job search statistically takes about 4 months. So personal financial runway would really depend on like A, how much time you're putting in, B, the roadmap for testing and proving demand based on whatever your business is. And then what kind of buffer you want. Like you want to be conservative. You never want to put yourself in a bad position. For me, I enjoyed having part-time jobs because I would try to find like jobs where I would pay for my life for like 10 or 20 hours a week. And then for the other 20 odd hours, I would build my business. And then eventually the business grew to the point where it paid me and I could quit those other jobs. So that's one way of doing it. That's not the only way of doing it. But I personally liked that because I feel like it's hard to put a deadline on things. Like I think with entrepreneurship personally, with the more time and persistence and creativity and the right guidance, you will figure it out one way or another, right? So that's kind of why I wanted to fund myself with those part-time jobs because I personally wanted to do like whatever it would take to get off the ground. And it's hard to predict how long that might take. So you might want to just think about that security. And that is why sometimes people do this on the side of a full-time job or on the side of a part-time job or whatever it may be. If there's a way of having some level of security, again, that's just one approach. Other people will try to go fundraise, but fundraising has a lot of other pros and cons, and it does take time as well. And just because you couldn't, can you fundraise? What if you can't raise money? Does that even mean that the business is not worth starting? It may or may not. Fundraising is just hard, right? And there's crowdfunding and there's a lot of other things you could do. So it's hard to answer that question perfectly, but this is where it's good to have like a coach or a mentor or a peer just to voice out loud, like, does this look reasonable to you? Right? Things like that. I see any recommendations on how to find a good small business CPA. Oh, so hold on. I'm going to make sure we don't have background noise. Small business CPA. I mean, I've used Upwork a fair amount to try to find like freelancers, consultants, your network. So start out is a great place. Get a recommendation, get a referral. If you can meet other founders and they already work with somebody and they could recommend them, like there's nothing better than that. I love to join a bunch of communities, Slack groups, just ask for referrals, ask for recommendations. What else? There might be others, but like honestly, I try to just make it like a networking approach. You could like post the job, on LinkedIn or wherever just to say you're hiring, but that just becomes the challenge with any hiring, right? It's like cold leads, it's hard to assess, it's hard to interview, it's hard to hire. So referrals, recommendations are always great. Use communities, join communities. You could even join like groups, Facebook groups for freelancers, entrepreneurs, things like that. Scrappy, being scrappy and resourceful and networking are going to be your friends if you're starting a business, right? So just getting comfortable with that. That's my quick answer. I'm sure I have more I could think of. Yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Laura, I know you unmuted. I don't know if you had a question or if anybody else has a question. I'll keep rolling with the chat for right now. So can you go over your funding journey, self-funded with co-founders, angels, other funding options? So we are fully bootstrapped. We did a very small crowdfunding campaign on I Fund Women. We also did participate in a fellowship through NYU Stern. It was the Stern Venture Fellowship. And then we also did a competition through NYU Tandon. It was the Intervention competition. We did earn a grant through the NSF I-Corps program, and that's spelled ICORPS. So we did earn that grant as well. Grants are hard, but not impossible. And accelerators and incubators are other types of programs that you can find support with. Obviously, the big ones are hard to break into, Techstars and YC, but I did participate in a lot of other, there was one that was actually based on the West Coast Fourth Wave Accelerator, the Halo Incubator, Tacklebox Accelerator. There was a bunch of programs that were really helpful for me in the beginning to get off the ground. I did leverage a lot of NYU things. So go back to your alma mater, actually, wherever you went to undergrad or grad, because oftentimes they have programs actually that are accessible to alumni. So definitely ask if they have a startup center, if they have mentorship resources, competitions. We had a big 300K competition at NYU that alumni actually could join. So that's awesome, right? And it gives you, sessions and workshops, and it gives you so many different things to participate in that. So yeah, we did have those programs, and then really it was just all revenue. So the very beginning for me, like, even if you're getting off the ground with a product, you could start by coaching or consulting or doing workshops. You could offer, like, get paid to do other things that are scrappier or quicker, right? Consulting type elements, and then you could build up your product. We had a Typeform career assessment. Then we had a Google Sheets MVP. So we removed all the cell borders and designed tabs of a Google Sheet that looked like a software. And then people started paying for that. That revenue and the other, funding that we got from those programs eventually built out a custom software. Then again, we kept getting revenue, even though that software was like very shitty. And then we redesigned and redeveloped that entire software. And we've now been on that same software for about 3 years. So that's just the software life cycle. There's a lot of like no code apps, but sometimes no code even takes money and time and talent to build properly. So if you can build it yourself, great. But honestly, think about a Google Sheet, think about a Google Doc, think about doing a workshop. How can you earn money? If somebody has a problem, how can you help them in a scrappy way right now and get some revenue in the door and use that revenue to fund the other things that you want to do? But yeah, we haven't really had any sort of angels. Recently we were going on acquire.com just to see what that could look like, if there's any interesting like collaborations or mergers or things like that. So we were dabbling with conversations that way. But really, I haven't tried to raise formal like angel or VC money just because I've heard a lot of, mixed things. So, and I'm a solo founder. So to invest the time was a little bit hard. And again, there's a lot of factors to think about with the fundraising journey. And it's a big decision. It's a big process, and it's time consuming. And so for me, I'm very kind of like grassroots type of person. So I was just like, look, build the thing. And if there's value, like someone will pay you. And I was like, that to me is going to prove to myself that I should keep doing this more than what a random investor, you're going to get all the no's from investors, right? It just takes the one, but you have to be ready to invest that time. And you got to ask yourself, like, does it make sense for me to fundraise? Do I have to fundraise? So there's a lot of different fundraising options, but crowdfunding can also be a fun one. Again, a lot of different options. There's debt, grants, incubators, accelerators, bootstrapping, fellowships, things like that, or just trying to get revenue, right? Or some combination. Cool. Any other questions? You are welcome. I hope this was helpful. Keep me posted. Like, let me know. I am here. You'll have my website. And yeah, like I said, our website is very career coaching oriented, but we have helped folks, if you're freelancing, consulting, or just starting out from 0 to 1, I sort of guide people to have momentum and accountability and support to take those first early steps, similar to how we did. So please feel free to reach out if I can be at all helpful, and hopefully we'll be back here in the future with Startup.
Great. Thank you everyone for attending. A big thank you again to our speaker, Rachel. Feel free to check out her website at IamWoken.com. For anyone else who's interested in other startup workshops and resources, feel free to check out startup.org to sign up for any future events. Thank you, everybody, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.